Hi, this is Angel Flores, a Master of Science in Teaching Chemistry student from the University of Southern Mindanao. And today in our course on Advanced Educational Psychology, we will talk about forgetting. So what is forgetting? According to Drever, forgetting is the failure at any time to recall an experience when attempting to do or perform an action previously done. Mann also defined forgetting as the loss, permanent or temporary, of the ability to recall or recognize something learned earlier. And Bhatia also defined forgetting as the failure of an individual to review in consciousness an idea or group of ideas without the help of original stimulus. In studying forgetting, there are two important words to consider. First is the availability, and the second is accessibility. Accessibility, it means that the information is represented in the memory, and accessibility, the information available can be accessed at any time or at a specific time and place. Okay, so parang ganito siya, parang halimbawa may kaibigan ka na gustong mangutang sa'yo kasi marami kang pera, pero umuwi pa rin siya, at the end umuwi pa rin siya na wala kang napahiram kasi yung pera mo nasa bangko. May pera ka, available, pero inaccessible siya sa panahon na yun kasi nasa bangko nga. Ganon din po sa memory. Pwedeng available, andito lang siya sa isip natin, pero pwedeng hindi siya accessible sa time na kailangan natin yung memory or yung information that we have learned. Now, there are three types of forgetting: the active forgetting, passive forgetting, and the abnormal forgetting. Active forgetting, it takes place when a person deliberately forgets a thing. Now, for example, a person himself wants to forget painful things, and the forgetting which results from inspiration received from the subconscious mind is active forgetting. The second type of forgetting is passive forgetting. The forgetting in which an individual has no role or no desire to forget. Okay, so this is called passive forgetting. Now, the third one is the abnormal forgetting. This forgetting is due to some obstructions, and among these obstructions, the main ones are the rise of emotion, arousal of doubt, and the presence of some complex in the unconscious. There are many theories of forgetting. So theories which wants to explain forgetting, the phenomenon of forgetting. We have the theory of decay, trace change theory, theory of interference, theory of motivated forgetting, retrieval failure theory, the absent-mindedness, and amnesia. So we will discuss it one by one. So first is theory of decay. According to this theory, forgetting is a process of fading with the passage of time. So it is believed by any people that forgetting is produced by time factor. According to this view, impressions created by learning in the cortex fade away as the time passes. In our daily life, we have a lot of experiences which fade away with the passage of time. Just like when we meet a person and forget his or her name after some time. So the second is the trace change theory. Actually, this is somehow or somewhat similar, or under the decay theory. So the trace change theory of forgetting grows from research on perception. Generally, change is brought about by the following principles: the closure, good figure, and symmetry. These three principles are seen as psychological principles that are built in respect of the functioning of brain tissues. So forgetting, according to this theory, is attributed to the change in traces in brain. So the third one is the theory of interference. Interference is a tendency for new memories to impair retrieval of older memories or vice versa. So according to this theory, we forget because other memories interfere when we try to retrieve information, especially if it is similar. So other memories disrupt or disturb the process of retrieval. There are two kinds of interference, the proactive inhibition or interference and the retroactive interference. Proactive inhibition or the proactive interference, okay, so remember of the prefix pro, which means forward. So proactive interference is a tendency for prior learning to inhibit recall of later learning, so such that in the interference goes forward. So in this case, what we already know interferes with what we are currently learning, or old memories disrupt new memories. The retroactive interference, okay, so remember of the prefix retro, which means backward. So retroactive interference occurs when you forget a previously learned task due to the learning of new task. In other words, later learning interferes with earlier learning. So where new memories disrupt older memories, backward. Proactive, forward. Retroactive, backward. So, theory of motivated forgetting. This theory describes forgetting as a defense mechanism in which people are motivated or desire to forget unwanted or disturbing memories, either consciously or the suppression, or unconsciously or the repression. Motivated forgetting is based on Freud's theory that people create a defense mechanism to protect themselves from painful experiences. Repression. It is unconsciously blocking a memory of an experience from entering your conscious awareness because it is psychologically painful or unpleasant to remember. So this is a defense mechanism used by our ego to protect us from anxiety. So it is not lost from memory, but not easily accessible during normal waking consciousness. Suppression naman, so the suppression, it is the deliberately making a conscious effort to keep it out of your conscious awareness. So people are aware of the event, however, make an effort not to think about it. Just like when you don't want to see someone who caused the pain, it may even be possible to deliberately forget information. Retrieval failure theory. It is also known as the cue-dependent forgetting. According to this theory, we forget because we lack or are not able to use the correct cues to retrieve or access information stored in long-term memory. So the reason for this is that many memories are forgotten because the cues or stimuli that were present at the time of learning or encoding are not present at the time when one needs to retrieve the information from memory. So when we say retrieval cue, it is any stimulus that assists the process of locating and recovering information stored in memory. So it is like a hook that allows you to pull an obscure memory from its hiding place. So this includes questions, emotional states, such as happiness or depression, physical states such as intoxicated or in pain. Are you influenced by alcohol by the time that you are learning? Or next, environmental cues such as the sights, the sounds, smells within that specific situation. The tip of the tongue phenomenon, it is a type of retrieval failure. The tip of the tongue phenomenon is the term for the temporary inability to remember something you know, accompanied by the feeling that it is just out of reach. So there is a failure to retrieve information from the memory, but there is often partial recall, such as the first letter, how many syllables it has, and the feeling that you know the information, that you will eventually remember it. Next is the absent-mindedness. If you ever put your keys when you entered your house and you couldn't find them later, you have experienced absent-mindedness. Attention and memory are closely related, and absent-mindedness involves problems at the point where attention and memory interface. Absent-mindedness occurs because at the time of encoding, sufficient attention was not paid to what would later need to be recalled. Another theory or reason of why we forget is the physical injury or the trauma. So this is amnesia. Amnesia is the inability to recall certain memories, often results from damage of any number of regions in our brain. So some types of amnesia are due to neurological trauma, but in other cases, the term amnesia is just used to describe normal memory loss, such as not remembering childhood memories. There are two main forms of amnesia caused by the brain damage. First is the retrograde amnesia and the anterograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia, or remember, so again, the retro, which means backward. Retrograde amnesia is the inability to recall memories made before the onset of amnesia. So retrograde amnesia is usually temporary and can often be treated by exposing the sufferer to cues for memories of the period of time that has been forgetting. So again, retrograde amnesia was you have forgotten the memories that are created prior the incident. Anterograde amnesia, on the other hand, is the inability to create new memories after the onset of amnesia, while memories from before the event remain intact. So anterograde, after the onset, so ibig sabihin, after ng incident na yon, mahirapan ka nang mag-create ng memories. Pero yung mga memories mo prior the incident, still intact. You can still remember them. There are some types of forgetting that are not due to traumatic brain injury, but instead as the results of the changes the human brain goes through over the course of lifetime. So actually, just like what has been discussed in trace change theory and the theory of decay. So the childhood amnesia, it is also called as the infantile amnesia, is the inability of adults to retrieve memories before the age of 2 to 4. So this is because of the first few years of life, brain structures such as the limbic system, which holds the hippocampus in the amygdala and is actually vital to memory storage, are not yet fully developed. The research has shown that children have the capacity to remember events that happened to them from age 1 and before while they are still relatively young. However, when we get older, we tend to be unable to recall. We tend to forget, or actually unable to recall memories from our youngest years. We have also here the neurocognitive disorders. The neurocognitive disorders are a broad category of brain diseases typical to old age that cause a long-term and often gradual decrease in the ability to think and recall memories such that a person's daily functioning is affected. The neurocognitive disorder is synonymous to dementia or the senility. The most common type of dementia is the Alzheimer's disease. We are familiar to that, which makes up to 50 to 70% of cases. Its common symptoms are short-term memory loss and word-finding difficulties. People with Alzheimer's also have troubles with visual spatial areas. For example, they may get lost often. They have trouble in reasoning, judgment, and insights into whether they are experiencing memory loss at all. There are a lot of factors which could lead us, or which could influence forgetting. So according to Rath, there are 8 factors or causes of forgetting. So the inadequate impression at the time of learning, lapse of time, interference of associations, repressions, rise of emotions, alterations of stimulus, poor health and defective mental state, aging. Okay, so some of these factors were actually discussed in the theory where they are associated with inadequate impression in the time of learning. As we learn, so we retain and are able to recall. Inadequate or improper learning or the weak encoding is likely to be forgotten. Intention or will is the most important factor in remembering a thing. Forced learning either results in no learning or has a very temporary effect. It results in no impression or in an inadequate one. This type of inadequate learning in most of the case can be the real cause of forgetting. The lapse of time. This describes theory of decay. Time is said to be the great leading factor. Psychologists have tried to name this cause as the passive decay through disuse. It leads us to conclude that the older an experience, the weak will be its memory, and as the time passes, amount of forgetting goes on increasing. Interference of association. Again, it has been discussed in the theory of interference. We forget because in a large part of associations interfere with one another. It means we forget something because what we have learned, period, interferes with the remembering of what we learn afterwards or the other way. Repression. Again, it was discussed from the motivated forgetting theory. Repression to the psychoanalytic school is a mental function that safeguards the mind from the impact of painful experiences. This kind of forgetfulness is wishful. Actually, we forget the things which we don't want to remember. Rise of emotions. Apart from causing abnormal forgetting, an impaired emotional state of an individual also plays a part in disrupting his normal memory process. A sudden excessive disturbance of emotions may completely block the process of recall. When one is under the influence of emotions like fear, anger, or love, one may forget all one has experienced, learned, or believed earlier. So, when in the grip of these emotions, one becomes so self-conscious that one's thinking becomes paralyzed. So, for instance, a child fails to recall the answer to a question in the presence of a teacher whom he fears or dislikes. Next is the alteration of stimulus. It was also discussed or described in retrieval theory. Sometimes forgetting occurs when we have alteration of the stimulating conditions between the time of learning and the time of recall. Our learning have a deep association with the portion kind of stimulus, and in the case it absent, we feel difficulty in recall. A child who learns the meaning of different words such as the cat, rat, dog, with the help of pictures, felt a great difficulty in naming them in the absence of such pictures. Next is the poor health and the defective mental state. A sound body is said to have a sound mind. Deterioration in health makes an individual less confident and more perturbed. So he remains under the state of tensions and thus is unable to concentrate upon a thing at a particular time. The people having a lower IQ or suffering from a mental defects have been generally found to be very poor in retention and recall. Aging. Age is also a factor for forgetting. In old age, the capacity of remembering decreases. Memory diminishes with age because neurons die off as we get older. Knowing what forgetting is and the factors which influence it, how can we minimize it? The following are the factors which helps to minimizing forgetting or the factors which would help us to improve memory. Rate of learning. So it is not true that when you learn something easily, it will also in return easily be forgotten. In rapid learning, forgetting is slow, and when learning is slow, forgetting is rapid. A slow learner would eventually have lost interest in the subject, thus forget the material rather quickly than a quick learner. So nawawalan na ng gana sa sobrang slow ng pagka-learn. So another thing is overlearning. Forgetting is said to be taking place as soon as we stop learning. So we must recall immediately after we have learned, and it must continue after intervals. Learning must be carried beyond the point where recall is just barely possible. Overlearning beyond the point of complete mastery and strengthens the impressions in the brain. Next is periodic review. This is very similar to self-recitation. Thus, as soon as we learn, we start the review of data. So reviews at frequent intervals prevent the decay of the learned data or information. Kind of material. Easy, simple, and meaningful, and of course, logically related materials are easy to retain and forgotten less rapidly. So thus, general concepts, scientific interpretations are better retained. Meaningless materials are forgotten quickly. Thus, associations make materials meaningful and quick to remember. Next is intention to learn. Firm determination or strong will to learn are required to achieve success. Proper methods of learning. Economical method must be chosen depending on the materials to be learned. So we choose paced versus mass or whole versus part learning. Self-recitation. After reading a lesson a few times, the student must try to review the whole thing without the help of a book. This method may also be termed as attempted recall, and it makes a more economical use of one's study time. It also helps towards permanent retention. Having learned those things, I just want to leave this word from Georges Duhamel. It says, "Do not trust memory. It is a net full of holes. The most beautiful prizes slip through it." So again, that's it for today.